things are looking pretty grim for this little Reaper. After seeing how nice the Tracer Nendo turned out, I ordered Reaper with relatively high expectations, despite not having a deep affinity for him. But I'll say it off the bat, Reaper has been one of the most frustrating Nendos I have ever experienced. First, let's check out the contents of the box. He understandably only comes with one faceplate, however hand options are lacking with only 3 for each arm, 2 of which are almost identical for holding his guns with slightly different wrist angles. Aside from that, he comes with his 2 guns and firing effect pieces, shadowy wraith effects for the bottom half of his coat, and a shadow step effect circle. So as usual, the detailing in both the sculpt and paintwork is fantastic, and the joints in his arms and legs blend in nicely. The metallic silver might even be a bit too shiny compared to other depictions of Reaper, but it does work quite well. I also really do like how his faceplate and hood turned out. You can absolutely stick some other faceplates in there to make him look really wacky. But moving on to my big list of issues, take a look at the lower half of the trench coat. It sits comically far away from where it's supposed to be attached and looks goofy as hell. This doesn't seem to be an isolated issue either, as I've found other people encountering the same thing too. Continuing on with the issues is my attempt at his iconic crossed arm pose, which looks kind of serviceable from this front on angle, but completely whack from the sides or from above because of how far his front gun has to sit away from his body. On top of that, the shadow step circle does not have a hole punched into it, which would let it sit further back on the base and be secured under the support arm's peg. GSC has left a hole in similar effect pieces like for the Saber Nendos, so it's really confusing why it wasn't done here as well. Reaper does prove himself a bit once he's holding his guns and moves into proper action poses. And I won't lie, I do think this looks pretty cool, but it can be pretty frustrating trying to pose him for a couple of reasons. His arms and hands are very spiky, which did end up hurting my fingers after having to constantly plug the guns back into his palms after they got bumped and fell out. The other reason is that his leg placement is kind of limited by his coat, which will inevitably also pop out when moving his legs around. What ended up being my favourite pose of his is the Wraith Walk. Swapping in the shadowy coat bottoms is great, because they seem to fit closer to his body, and they just look way cooler in general. I definitely do think that it's the way to go, and at the very least provides an alternative to the default coat. Finally, my most anticipated pose was his ultimate, which turned out to be a huge disappointment. I tried so hard to get it to look right, but I just couldn't. His arms droop when holding the guns with the shooting effects. Turning his head at all here bumps his shoulder joints, which then ruins his arms too. And that's not to mention how hard it is to try and get his arms pointing out straight in the first place anyway. On top of that, once again, like the Len Nendoroid, the center strand of the gunshot effect parts curve to one side instead of pointing straight ahead, which looks super awkward for firing guns. I tried my best with this pose, and I like to think I'm pretty good with Nendos, but it still ended up looking a bit wrong to me. Maybe one day I'll have another crack at posing and figure out some trick to make it work. If it wasn't for having to get all of the footage for the review, I honestly would have just left him in the Wraith form or just given up entirely and not put him on display. So obviously my final thoughts are going to be very positive. Reaper can look good, but most poses I tried didn't hit the mark at all. And I'd also say they maybe look better on camera than they do in person. Not only is it a battle with the Nendo himself falling to bits, but his spikes are going to hurt when you have to squeeze everything back together a million times. I can only seriously recommend him for die-hard Reaper fans or people collecting the entire Overwatch Nendo collection. And those two audiences are probably going to buy him no matter what my judgment is. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the review and maybe even saved some money. If you have, leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more anime figure content. This has been the Ando Experience, and I'll catch ya in the next one. Bye.